Welcome back to Just Take 30. I'm glad to see you come back if you got more questions on how to start playing Magic. I addressed the last video as the biggest loaded question in Magic is how to play. And in a lot of ways that is true, but in a lot of ways it's not. It's kind of self-explanatory if a person really wants to know. So, if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and comment. Commenting is probably the biggest thing I have found on this channel, is trying to get people to comment, try to be a little more interactive with me, and stuff like that. So I appreciate everybody who's clicked the follow button, and thank you on that. So this video is going to be about, first off, keywords. There's 5 keywords I'm going to go over. I'm kind of explain the 5 keywords. And so let's just jump into that. And, and I was going to go over card types too. Okay. So let's jump into the keywords, because that is the most confusing in my opinion. As a newer player, I ain't really that new. I've been playing for right at 3 years, now. So I've got a little season on me, but still kind of somewhat new, I get confused easy, but I just ain't giving up, okay? So, the first keyword, was my hardest to learn how to understand, and the purpose it done was vigilance. Okay, in Magic, when you tap a creature, and attack, that card is tapped. You have no open cards if you attack with 3 vigilant, regular cards. But technically, if they're vigilant creatures, they never tap. But they still can do combat damage, leaving you have 3 blockers. That's very interesting. I don't think a lot of new players really fully understands what vigilance is. Unless they get to play with it a couple times. That was me when I started putting vigilance in a few of my homebrew decks. Was very important. Again, moving to the second word is a kind of confusing, but kind of not, is poison. Now, poison is technically can be considered 3 keywords, and it's very confusing. You got infect. That pretty well is poison, okay? And then you got toxic is pretty well poison again. And then you got poison is poison. But that keyword is if you deal 10 damage to a person with, not 10 damage, but you hit them one time. The card does say, like, put a 1 poison counter on, right? What's bad about that is if a person got 4 or 5 of them suckers and they're attacking you, that's 4 or 5 poison counters coming onto you when you can only have 10. 10 is the magic number there. It don't matter if you're playing commander. It does not matter if you're playing a one-on-one. 10 poison counters, you lose the game. And that is very confusing for a new player when they're told, hey, you got 20 life or 40 life. And then you want to swing 10 of something at them. and they get 10 poison counters and they're dead. They're out of the game. So I think anybody who is playing a poison deck with newer players, just explain that to them. Okay, the third key word is another interesting one, is Death Touch. I think Death Touch is a very self-explanatory keyword, but there's some rules with, Death Touch. If a creature has like trample and you want to block that creature, and it's maybe like a 12/12, some kind of dinosaur, right? And you got a little 1/1 rat with Death Touch, as long as that hits, because you're blocking, you won't get trample damage comes over. But that 1/1 is going to kill the dinosaur too. That's a rules question, but trample does work. It will deal the necessary remainder of the combat damage it was going to intend if you just block with 1/1. So that's very interesting. But now, like, if you was playing a rat with maybe Death Touch and First Strike with the same situation, that 1/1 is going to hit that dinosaur first and back off, and then it would kill the dinosaur. Kind of self-explanatory, but at the same time, and you get to keep your rat. The only way they would be ever challenged, and that's a sack issue, is if the dinosaur had First Strike and Trample, and then it was actually the one clearing combat damage at that time, it would hit the rat first. And then excess damage would come your way, canceling out that rat's First Strike too, because both had. It was in the order was cast. So that's how that would technically work in that world. So that's 3 or 4 if you want to count First Strike and Death Touch, and also Trample. So that was 3 right there. So another keyword I was wanting to talk about is lifelink. Lifelink is very confusing, was for me too, another keyword. I understood what it was, but I really didn't understand how it worked. I thought you had to deal with me. I thought you had to deal the damage to the other opponent to get the lifelink. And what I've been told is that ain't how that works. As long as that creature deals a combat damage during your combat phase, you gain the amount of life it was. If it was a 2/2, 4/4, or 12/12, it doesn't really matter. You gain the amount of life that creature did deal. Okay? And I couldn't really understand it. I thought that was something solely I had to hit the other person with. Okay? And that was not, is not the case in what I have figured out. And what as other people has told me how lifelink works. So, and that's one thing I will gotta stop right here and say, going to your local LGSs and sitting down and playing with real people, you want to learn, you want to pay attention. I think still the biggest tools is Arena, but Arena does everything so fast, you can't keep up with it as a new player. Okay, it's fun, but it also will make a lazy new player. So now the 5th word, something is one of my all-time favorite keywords is called haste. When you attack, when you summon a creature, that creature has summoning sickness. Okay, that card has summoning sickness unless it has haste. And then as soon as that card is cast, you can attack. You can deal combat damage in your combat phase with haste. It's a very powerful card. It's a very questionable card, too, because of that. And if you're playing with new players, again, it's like Toxic. Just take the time to explain what haste is. Because maybe that will prevent argument down the road. Because new people might think you're cheating them, okay? So we're at the card types in Magic the Gathering. So what are they? First off, you got creatures. That's very self-explanatory. You know, your creatures has got your keywords. And then they will have your power and toughness, you know, what you want to deal and what you can actually block. That's very common information. But some creatures does have special abilities, and that's where the keywords comes into play. So that's very interesting. It's very interesting indeed. Another card type is, you know, your planeswalkers. Planeswalkers, they're going to come in and they don't got a toughness or a power. They got a loyalty counter on them. And you can uptick them or you can, you know, negative, you know, do the negative abilities. And that takes, it's a downtick, you know, in that world. So they're kind of all over the place. Really. But they're not and should not be associated with a basic creature. And another card is in these three is technically a creature. It will have a power and will have a toughness, but it has to follow under the legend rule. Only one on battlefield. Used to be, the old rules used to be back in the day was if one legendary card was on the battlefield, either side, that was the only one could be on. But now they've redone that, but you can't have duplicates. Like Shield the Apocalypse, you can't put 4 on the battlefield at one time. You just can't happen. Because they will cancel out, and you technically could do it, but then technically one will die instantaneous. So you kind of can't do it. It's how that is. So that's the first 3, and that's your creatures. You know, there's other creature cards. You know, you got enchantment and you got artifact creatures. And they're pretty well the same as a basic creature. It's just they are not a basic creature. And they're technically, you know, a artifact, but in one way you could call them an artifact and get away with it, or an enchantment, you know, creature. But them is, you don't really see many of them too often, and if you do, it's just occasional. Like I have found most people will play something, you know, like dinosaurs or, you know, dragons or, you know, something really like noticeable as be a basic creature, okay? But they are out there, so just keep an eye on them. They usually got special abilities, and they're kind of difficult to remove, but technically they're not difficult. I mean, it's really where them two creatures of the cards is kind of wonky in my opinion. But besides that, I mean, they're really interested to play with and to see get played. Again, I've been in Magic now, like I said, 3 years, and I've only seen them played a handful of times. It's like you forget about them because they're out there. Moving into, lands. Lands is a very simple concept. There's, my opinion, is 2 types of lands. One is just your basic land, your mana. You gotta have mana all through this game to tap and attack. You do. Without mana or a basic land, that is probably the most important card in your deck. Them is cards you really don't want to take advantage of too much. You don't want to play a lot of decks in a certain way unless there's a way you can remove, you can benefit with the mana. You can only pay 1 mana per turn. That's kind of the downfall on mana. Unless you have a enchantment or a artifact or something, creature, planeswalker, it really has to be stated you can play multiple mana on 1 turn. But them's really hard to get cards, and when they are in the wild in the LGS, they're usually swiped up pretty fast, to be truthful. So, and then you got your dual lands. And them is your lands is got the text on it. And just read the text, because a lot of them comes in tapped. Some don't come in tapped, but it's going to cost you 2 life to play. You really got to be mindful on the order of how you're playing these lands. But dual lands, like it means it can tap for multiple colors in Magic. So that's very good information. It's probably the best, but the dual lands, again, where you technically have access to 2 colors for a new player, you want to hold on to them. You don't really want to get rid of them because them is pretty expensive cards and they can add up very fast, especially if you're playing like modern and stuff where you're needing 4 of a copy of a card, and them cards can easily hit $10, $15, $20 a card just because you've got access to 2 types of mana. Very powerful card. So the next thing is artifacts. Artifacts is probably, in my opinion, is technically would be the hardest to deal with, seeing people play the artifact, because a lot of cards has to physically say artifact to remove it or destroy, but they're out there. They're very simple to get, but artifacts can be a problem on the battlefield, first off. And a lot of your artifact cards can tap for mana, and they can tap for colorless mana. That's very key. That's very big too, because there's 5 colors in Magic, but there's technically 6, and the 6th one is colorless. Now, if you got now generic mana cost is not the same as colorless. Very big deal. A big difference, okay? But a lot of these artifact cards does tap for one or the other. Oh. So it's very self-explanatory. It is very normal to run across these types of cards. Very simple. Third, and then we're moving into enchantments. Enchantments is pretty well similar to an artifact card, but at the same time, they're completely different. They can be abilities, they can cast, they can stop if an opponent is going off, like drawing too much. It can give a trigger ability on that stuff, and it's very complex gameplay. So if you ever see a person really playing artifacts and enchantments too at the same time, you really need to pay attention to the cards they're playing, because they might have a trigger on your upkeep. They might have a trigger on your draw step. Anytime you gain life, it is not your responsibility to keep up with what's on their field. If they see you do something, they're supposed to call you out. That's technically how it's supposed to be. Because you're talking about a card game is got easy between 29 to probably 50,000 magic cards. One place I look at, it says there's 50 some magic cards, and some places says there's around 29,000, of individual cards. So that's kind of wild. You can't know them all. You just can't. It's just too much. So if your opponent's trying to get you for cheating because you ain't paying attention to their board, it's a simple argument. They're really supposed to enforce their cards. What technically needs to be done. Okay, moving to the biggest 2 cards. Gets played the wrong, and I played this card wrong. My first couple months playing Magic, I played it wrong almost every game, and really didn't realize I was doing it. And that was a sorcery. And I would play the card wrong by accident till somebody pointed out, hey, you can't do that. That's a sorcery. That's not an instant. And it does make you feel kind of dumb. It makes you feel stupid. Kind of embarrassment. So I wouldn't beat yourself up, because you are one to make mistakes. You are one to have trouble in Magic together to learn how to play. But you're learning. That's great. Just keep trying. But a sorcery card cannot be played unless it is in your first or second main phase. That's very important on the sorcery cards. So just use that information and try to process when that card could be played. And if you do play one wrong, it ain't the end of the world. But again, and if you're not for sure on sorcery or anything, because you might have got them backwards, always ask a question first off. There's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. So, the last card type, I think I've covered them all but instant. And again, instant is like it means, like it sounds. It can be at any time in the game. Your opponent's turn, your turn, when they draw, it doesn't really matter as long as you have the available I got tongue tied available mana, and you could actually cast that card by tapping your mana and doing a counter spell or something in that nature. That is very big. That's very, straightforward. But you can play that at any point and any time during a game of Magic. And that's what confused me in a game of Magic with the sorceries was I thought sorcery was the same as the instant, but I was wrong. And after I learned it, it kind of makes the game feel a little better to play. So, if you like this content, again, like, subscribe, comment. Again, need to run over the course of a turn. And I'm thinking the next video will be the final video of this series. Is the order of a turn. Keep this in mind. You got your untap, your upkeep, and your draw. Them is 3 stated effects in the game. You have to do them unless you have no upkeep costs. But the first 2, or the first one and last one, is a stated effect. You have to do. Okay. Second thing, we're talking about your first main phase. Your first main phase is where you get to cast mana and to start building your board. That's what that is. You got to worry about keywords like haste. And if you do use haste on the first turn, you're already a turn ahead, okay, technically, because your haste card does not have summoning sickness. So you can technically go into your combat phase on your turn 1. And probably they don't have no blockers to do it. Or if they do, they just don't want to lose a blocker early in the game. So that's your first main phase. But after you acquire attack and what you're attacking, you technically have entered into your combat phase. Now, combat phase is very self-explanatory. That's where the other player will get to acquire blockers, or they will take the damage. Very not questionable, about that. And then after all that's done, we move into our second and final main phase. If you got open mana at this point, you can untap and you can cast another creature, another card. So that's very big, very simple about it, okay, in your second main phase. And then after that, it goes to your incept, and that's basically you're finishing up on your board and you are physically passing the turn to the next player. What that is. Again, Just play nice, play, right, and try to focus on the little of the proper gameplays moving forward, because you'll want to enjoy the gameplay a little better and what it would have been if you wasn't taking that stuff serious. And your opponent will probably be glad, if you're new coming in, to be glad you are trying to do the proper steps. Because some Magic players is very sticklers on how you physically play the game. So, again, this is Just Take 3, signing out.